Coming up on Arirang News, data shows South Korea's economy grew by almost 2% in the third quarter from the quarter before. Exports strongly higher, but the economy still shrank compared to a year ago. New cases of COVID-19 in South Korea back below 100, but there are concerns about Halloween parties this coming weekend potentially spreading the virus. And only a week left until Election Day in the U.S. Turnout is at a record high in early voting, but it's not clear whether that benefits the Republicans or the Democrats. The polls still show Joe Biden with a big lead. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The number of new cases of COVID-19 in South Korea has fallen back below 100. Most of them are in the Seoul area, and many are at hospitals and nursing homes. One concern is Halloween coming up this weekend and the risk that young people could spread the virus when they go to clubs and bars. Paeunji has the details.
South Korea reported 88 new COVID-19 cases on Tuesday, falling back below 100 after the number of confirmed cases had hit triple digits the day before. Of them, 72 cases were transmitted locally and 16 were from overseas. More than 80% of the local transmissions came from the nation's capital area, with 24 in Seoul and 35 in the surrounding Gyeonggi-do province and Incheon. Officials have warned against complacency as sporadic cluster infections continue to be seen, mainly in nursing homes and healthcare facilities. The virus has also been transmitted through family gatherings. What started at a family gathering in Seoul led to more than 40 people testing positive as the virus spread to other cities. Health officials are also concerned over the upcoming weekend, as this year's Halloween celebrations on Saturday could bring another uptick in the number of cases.
We expect a lot of people together in clubs and bars this Halloween weekend. So we ask everyone to wear masks at all times and strictly abide by the social distancing guidelines.
Earlier in May, the country saw a surge in cases when cluster infections from clubs in Seoul's nightlife district of Itaewon led to a widespread outbreak. The total number of confirmed cases now stands at more than 26,000. There were 3 more deaths, raising the death toll to 460. Paeunji, Arirang News.
8 days to go until Election Day in the United States. It seems the pandemic is encouraging people to vote early so they can avoid the crowds. Some polls suggest this is a good sign for the Democrats, but it could be that more Republicans are waiting to vote in person. Jang Tae-hyun reports.
There's only about a week until the November 3rd U.S. presidential election, but Americans are casting their votes in droves. The number has already topped 62 million, already higher than the 58.3 million pre-election votes recorded in 2016. Early voting is skyrocketing in the U.S. due to the COVID-19 pandemic. States are reporting record-breaking voting rates by mail as well as early in-person voting.
There's a lot more awareness about the media and the news that we've seen in the last year, and it's our job to kind of use that knowledge to equip us to make a better choice.
It's something that is scary for people because they don't believe that their votes will be heard. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to stand in line is because I was a little bit worried.
According to the U.S. Elections Project, 19 states that disclose the party of the person voting early show 49% are registered Democrats, 28% registered Republicans, and 22% independents. However, a survey by CBS shows many of those who have not voted yet are pro-Trump since they're planning to vote for the incumbent on Election Day. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
South Korea has posted its economic data for the third quarter, and it shows the first quarterly GDP growth this year. This comes despite the sudden resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic over the past few months. Ji-young has the details.
Despite the surge in COVID-19 infections in the past couple of months, South Korea posted a first quarterly GDP growth of 2020. The Bank of Korea said on Tuesday that the country's GDP in the third quarter grew by 1.9% compared to the previous quarter. The South Korean economy had previously shrunk by 1.3% in the first quarter and by 3.2% in the second quarter. The third quarter's growth could be from the base effect coming after the second quarter saw the lowest growth in over 11 years. But the central bank says the country's exports played a big part in the improved GDP figures.
Although private consumption turned negative and there was a larger decrease in investment in construction, exports and investment in facilities increased sharply.
Exports, which are the key driver of the South Korean economy, rose by 15.6% on quarter, led by automobiles and semiconductors, mainly due to the economic recovery seen in major trading partners such as China. Imports also increased by around 5%, mainly on crude oil and chemical products. One expert said the South Korean economy is still worse compared to the same period last year, but it could get better in some areas over the next few quarters.
Negative overall growth for 2020 is inevitable in the current situation, but as the government will conduct large-scale financial projects, there could be some improvement in the fourth quarter.
Shortly after the central bank released the figures, Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki said he expects the economy to continue to pick up in the following quarters. He said that it is meaningful to see the recovery, especially in exports, but added that the country might have seen even more growth if there hadn't been a resurgence of the virus in August. 엄지영, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in will be giving a policy speech at the National Assembly Wednesday morning on the budget for 2021. Moon's expected to highlight the need for thorough quarantine measures and efforts to prop up the economy to ensure going forward that Korea can withstand crises. Next year's proposed budget calls for spending worth 555.8 trillion won, or just under $500 billion US dollars. That's an on-year increase of 8.5%. Moon is expected to urge lawmakers to pass it before the legal deadline of December 2nd. They are, however, likely to clash over the size of the budget and its effect on the country's fiscal soundness, given that the government has already used 4 extra budgets this year. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, stocks in New York, a big sell-off overnight. The Dow falling by the most among the 3 main indices, down by more than 2.25%. Only a week to go until Election Day, and new stimulus is not looking like it's going to happen. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, Dow Jones plunged about 2.3%. S&P 500 also went down by 1.9%, and NASDAQ went down less by 1.6%. All in all, this is due to because of the uncertainty regarding the COVID-19. And if you look at the level of the additional new patient, on Friday, it reached 83,000 plus in one day. And then over the weekend, the highest number came through of 85,000 plus. And this is the record number, and obviously the second wave of pandemic is actually happening, and everybody's concerned that the K-shaped recovery would continue in the future unless there comes some kind of relief measures. And it seems that until the November 3rd, the ruling parties are the ruling party and opposition party are not deciding yet in terms of going through this relief package, anywhere between 1.8 to 2.2 trillion, 2.2 trillion US dollars in terms of the fiscal additional boosting measures. If it passes, then I think that the economy will recover and that the equity market can rise. But for the time being, people are quite uncertain because of the elections are not finished yet. However, though, if you look at the overall earnings number, it seems to be good that the 80% plus of the companies that reported earnings are showing better than expected numbers. Yes, it is down from YOY number, but nevertheless, it is improving from Q-on-Q numbers, and that should have some supporting measures for the equity market in the short term. So we think that it's going to be quite timid equity market trend in the future for next 1 week or so until the election actual results comes through.
Well, now here in Korea, the Kospi was a bit lower today, but interestingly, the Kosdaq closed higher. Perhaps yesterday's sell-off was a bit too much. What happened in the local market?
Yes, as you said, Kospi rebounded Kospi went down by another 0.5% plus after falling 0.7% yesterday. But as far as Kosdaq is concerned, because it went down so much, over 3% plus yesterday, today it has risen somewhat. However, though, the uncertainty regarding the 300 million, the tax-related capital gains tax, the limit as the large shareholders is 100 million. Now it can go down to 1 billion. It can go down to 300 million. If that's the case, then there could be quite additional selling coming through from the local retail investors. Obviously, the foreign investors as well as institutional investors are not selling because they don't really pull this kind of regulations. And the fundamental seems to be quite reasonably good for Korean companies, where the earnings are down, but nevertheless it is improving from Q-on-Q numbers. So being said, right now market is moving in a basis on the regulatory environment rather than actual fundamental environment. So I think that the U.S. election is the most important thing as well. So election needs to be passed, and also this regulation needs to be settled. Then we think that the Korean equity market can rise in the future.
Well, today's big story, the Korean economy growing in the third quarter by 1.9% from the quarter before, but still, of course, a contraction from a year earlier. What do you make of these figures?
Yes, this is the same as what's happening to the earnings growth for Korean companies. If you look at the GDP numbers, it rebounded 1.9% quarter on quarter. So clearly it is improvement. Of course, it is down year-on-year numbers by about 1.3%. But nevertheless, once again, it is rising from the previous quarter. And so the COVID-19 is having implications, but it is improving from that concern. And also this number is coming better than expected because market was expecting 1.7% increase quarter on quarter, but it is actually coming at 1.9%. Clearly, these numbers are coming better because of the manufacturing sector that is shown about 7.6% rise after a quite significant decline in the previous quarter. And clearly, Korea being one of the high IT-related country, and also if you look at the auto sector, it is doing also better. So all in all, the global competitiveness in terms of the manufacturing sector remains to be very high, and therefore Korea seems to be quite reasonably good at this point in time. So as once again, the economy numbers needs to be improved further. But we think that the YOY number will also turn positive sometime in the first quarter next year. If that's the case, 2021 equity market should be a quite good year.
All right, Mr. Yu, thank you for your insights today. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
The World Trade Organization is choosing a new director general. One of the two candidates is South Korea's trade minister, Yu Myung-hee. But European countries are reportedly backing the candidate from Nigeria, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the country's former finance minister. According to AFP, EU officials reached a consensus in a meeting on Monday. Some countries had supported the Korean trade minister, but the EU states are expected to publicly announce their decision on Tuesday. The WTO hopes to make a decision on its new director general by November 7th. The South Korean government is looking to change the way it assesses the value of real estate so it can charge higher property taxes as a way of cooling down the housing market. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport unveiled the proposal Tuesday in a public hearing. Under the plan, by 2030, the government would assess property at either 80, 90 or 100% of its market value. The current rates are 65.5% for land and 69% for homes. One of the three proposed rates will be finalized after taking into account opinions from the hearing. The gap in incomes between temporary workers and regular workers in South Korea is wider than ever now in the pandemic. According to Statistics Korea, between June and August this year, temporary workers made a monthly average of 1.7 million won, or about $1,500, while regular workers made around 3.2 million won, or about $2,800, almost double. This is the biggest gap since the figure was first compiled in 2004. Temporary workers put in around 30 hours a week, while for regular workers it was about 40. Because of the pandemic, the industry that shed the most temporary workers was food and accommodation. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.